It won't hurt me. Insects never hurt me. I love them.
You love them?
Yes. I love all insects.
Dario Argento's Phenomena can lay reasonable claim to being the master of horror's most singularly bizarre film. As the first he self-produced without the guiding hand of either his father Salvatore or his brother Claudio, it's a bizarre hodgepodge of different, often wildly incongruous elements, a litany of self-quotation that draws on both the conventional whodunit giallo mysteries of the early 70s and his forays into the world of supernatural horror with Suspiria and Inferno in 1977 and 1980 respectively. Languidly paced and with a running time of nearly 2 hours in its longest form, it would be fair to say that both its protracted length and its numerous absurdities have baffled and frustrated fans and critics alike, not least the controversial decision to include heavy metal tracks from the likes of Motorhead and Iron Maiden, often at the most inappropriate junctures. Arguably because of these perceived lapses in discipline on the part of its director, different attempts have been made to tame Phenomena, shortening and recutting it into more manageable forms. This visual essay looks at the 3 distinct iterations of the film, as well as the perils and pitfalls of attempting to present it in a complete form to an English-speaking audience. Phenomena was released in Italian cinemas on the 31st of January 1985, with a running time of just under 116 minutes. Its editor was Franco Fraticelli, Argento's longtime collaborator who, at that point, had cut all of his films with the exception of 1971's Four Flies on Grey Velvet, whose status as a co-production had called for the use of a French editor. Much has been made of the fact that Phenomena was the first Argento film to be shot entirely in English, though in reality this is somewhat misleading as all of his films up to Phenomena and beyond were shot with the vast majority of the cast speaking English. A more meaningful point to make would be that this was his first film to make heavy use of actual production sound as opposed to the usual Italian practice of post-dubbing, most notably in the scenes featuring the film's 2 native English speakers, Jennifer Connelly and Donald Pleasence. The result of this is that the Italian cut of the film, despite being the longest version and, one would assume, Argento's preferred version, is an imperfect beast. Dubbed in its entirety, it unavoidably loses a great deal of the nuance in Connelly and Pleasence's performances. On the other hand, Daria Nicolodi's performance as the murderous Frau Bruckner benefits somewhat from the use of her actual speaking voice, even if she, like everyone else, was speaking English on the set. Now here's where things get interesting. In addition to the 116-minute Italian cut, a slightly shorter 110-minute English language version was prepared for sale to international markets. This version was created in Italy by Argento's usual team, and it's reasonably safe to assume that it was assembled with his blessing, or at least without his explicit disapproval. In essence, this is a similar tale to the shorter international version of Argento's earlier Deep Red, whose unwieldy 126-minute running time was curtailed to a far brisker 106 minutes in its English export variant. According to filmmaker and Argento scholar Thomas Rostock, the standard convention was that Franco Fraticelli would edit the long, domestic Italian version while leaving the task of creating the tighter export version to his assistant Pietro Bozza, working in conjunction with dubbing editor Nick Alexander. Unlike Deep Red, however, which in its international version loses entire scenes, many of them focused on the interplay between leads David Hemmings and Daria Nicolodi, Phenomena's trims are far subtler and are concerned primarily with tightening up rather than wholesale revision. They're so subtle, in fact, that it's possible in numerous instances to watch the same scenes in both the 116 and the 110-minute versions back to back and not realise that any changes have actually taken place. Take a look at this brief exchange between Jennifer Connelly and Donald Pleasence at around 25 minutes into the 116-minute version.
Mi ricordo di una ragazza. Greta. che veniva qui qualche volta ad aiutarmi, a farmi un po' da segretaria. E poi...
Poi?
Una sera doveva venire qui, ma non è mai arrivata.
L'ha uccisa il mostro.
E tu come fai a saperlo?
Remind me of another girl. Rita. She used to come here sometimes, help out. Mostly secretarial work. And then...
Then,
She was supposed to come here one night. She never arrived.
the killer got her.
What do you know about that?
Now, these look pretty similar, but now let me show you that again with the sections removed from the international version blanked out.
Remind me of another girl. Rita. She used to come here sometimes, help out. Mostly secretarial work. And then...
Then,
She was supposed to come here one night. She never arrived.
the killer got her.
What do you know about that?
This scene is a really good illustration of what the vast majority of the edits in the international version consist of. A nip here, a tuck there, tiny edits, often only 6 or 7 frames in total, at the beginnings and ends of shots. They're so minuscule that it almost defies logic that they were either made in the first place or that they weren't simply applied to the Italian version as well. Here's another example, the infamous scene in which Jennifer is forced to undergo an EEG by the school doctor.
Will someone please tell me what this EEG is supposed to do?
What you did last night is highly irregular. No student ever left the school at night before.
How many times do I have to tell you that I didn't walk out on purpose? I walk in my sleep. It happens.
But it is not normal. It's our duty to know more.
These tiny trims constitute literally dozens of edits throughout the running time, though it's worth noting that for the first nearly 13 minutes of the film, both the Italian and international versions are perfectly in sync without a single frame of difference. Then, at 12 minutes and 50 seconds, this happens.
Parliamo tutti la sua lingua. Poi l'attuale programma di studi è equiparato a quello americano.
Ah! Una vespa! Oh, stia attenta!
No! No, ma che fa? Ferma! La lasci stare! La smetta!
Via, via, via! Oh, be careful, it might sting you!
No! Leave me alone!
This is one of a small number of actual dialogue moments that are present in the Italian version but absent in the international cut. Other examples include Jennifer being led away by the 2 boys after her first sleepwalking incident, a woman imploring Jennifer to close a window on a bus, and a lengthier argument between Jennifer and Frau Bruckner about pills.
The bathroom is over there. And you will take the pills.
Non prendo mai medicine.
Do as you're told. You're my responsibility.
Stia a sentire, io non ho niente. E poi che pillole sono quelle?
Sono contro la febbre. Male non ti fanno di sicuro. Sei affidata a me. Io ti dico di prendere queste medicine e tu le devi prendere, capito?
Ehi, mi fa male. Mi lasci.
Prendile.
All right. I'll take the pills.
I'll get you some water.
I can get it myself.
This latter example also flags up another interesting anomaly between the 2 versions, the inclusion on the 110-minute version of 2 brief shots not present in the 116-minute version. In both instances, these are inserted to cover up a cut in the middle of what, in the Italian version, is a single uninterrupted take. The first is used to cut Jennifer's argument with Frau Bruckner down to the bare minimum, the second to shorten a fairly lengthy shot of Bruckner dragging the unconscious Jennifer across the floor. Other cuts are more significant, but without impacting on any of the dialogue. In many instances, these have been done to curtail some of the lengthier tension-building scenes with no actual impact on the narrative. For instance, we see less of the news broadcast about the disappearance of one of the killer's victims. The nurse guarding Jennifer takes considerably less time to fall asleep. Jennifer spends less time chasing after the longest phone cord in history. And Jennifer's ordeal in the body part swamp and Frau Bruckner's subsequent assault at the hands of Inspector Geiger are both, perhaps mercifully for all those involved, curtailed. The longest single cut, a mere 26 seconds in length, reduces a fight between Jennifer and Bruckner over the phone to its bare minimum, and in doing so helps rein in some of Daria Nicolodi's more histrionic acting.
Ho detto di no! No! Tu non devi telefonare a nessuno, hai capito? Sei a casa mia e devi fare quello che dico io!
Indeed, no actual impact on the narrative would be a good way of summing up the cuts to the 110-minute version. I've not sought to provide an exhaustive breakdown of every single edit, but the examples I've given convey a good impression of the thinking behind the removal of these 6 minutes. If you've only previously seen the 110-minute version, then the 116-minute cut isn't going to come as some sort of grand revelation on the same level as the longer version of Deep Red, or other highly compromised films like Mario Bava's Lisa and the Devil, or Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America. By the same token, however, I feel that those who criticise the longer version for its drawn-out scenes but feel that the international cut achieves a more acceptable balance are perhaps overstating the case somewhat. In both its 110 and 116-minute variants, Phenomena is very much the same film, and every bit as maddeningly and wonderfully idiosyncratic. The same can't be said for the third variation of Phenomena, which is so different that in actual fact it isn't even called Phenomena. For its US release, the rights to the film were acquired by New Line Cinema, whose recent release of Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street was in the process of transforming them from a small independent distributor into a major Hollywood player. Released theatrically on the 8th of August 1985, Phenomena was retitled Creepers and shorn of nearly 25 minutes worth of material, by far the most extreme act of tampering inflicted on a director who had already experienced a long history of such interference by both distributors and censors. Unlike the 110-minute international version, these cuts were carried out in America at the behest of New Line executives who were determined to reduce the film to a more crowd-pleasing length. As revealed by former New Line publicist Gary Hertz in his liner notes for the comprehensive 2016 US Blu-ray release of Phenomena by Synapse Films, the task of overseeing this fell to Jack Shoulder, fresh off directing A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And it makes a degree of sense that the man responsible for bringing Phenomena in at a taut 83 minutes was a filmmaker in his own right. For more than merely shortening it, Creepers represents a wholesale reworking of the film, attempting to reconstruct it as a brisker, more focused, and at times more linear slasher movie. We get a sense of Shoulder's approach right from the off with the opening murder of Vera Brandt, played by Fiore Argento. The basic beats are all there. Vera misses her bus, wanders to a secluded alpine house looking for help, and encounters the killer, who attacks, pursues, stabs, and decapitates her. But while this sequence runs for 6 minutes and 56 seconds in both the 116 and 110-minute versions, here it lasts for a mere 5 minutes and 14 seconds. Nothing strictly essential is lost, but in the rush to get to the good stuff, the ultra slow motion shot of Fiore's head crashing through the window and its subsequent decapitation, much of the carefully cultivated atmosphere and mounting sense of unease are lost. It all happens too quickly, too perfunctorily, and in an effort to give the sequence more of a linear logic, the seemingly unmotivated cutaways after the opening credits to shots of the house, an Argento mainstay, are abandoned in favour of a more typical cause and effect editing structure. Now, after the credits, we return straight to Fiore, and the scene is somewhat clumsily recut to make it look like she sees the house and makes her way towards it, as opposed to the more unhurried fairy tale-like manner by which she simply sets off following the nearest path in the longer versions, coming to the house more by chance than by anything else. From there, the cuts and rearrangements come thick and fast. Though there's not a huge amount of material lost from it, the scene introducing Donald Pleasence as Professor John McGregor is reordered to get to the point more quickly, in doing so losing much of McGregor's detailing of the rationale behind his entomological experiments. We then, as before, meet Jennifer Connelly and Daria Nicolodi, and as they arrive at the school, we get what in many respects feels like a masterclass in paring a scene back to the bone.
And so Jennifer arrives in Switzerland from the New World to pass her first memorable night at the Richard Wagner International School for Girls.
Take the bags in, please. Impressive, isn't it? The estate was once Richard Wagner's home. The school only occupies the main building.
The others are closed because they're not safe. Never go into them, ever. Come along. The estate was once Richard Wagner's home. The school only occupies the main building. The others are closed because they're not safe. Never go into them, ever. Come along.
Again, this is a clear example of the philosophy behind creepers being put into practice. The scene is reduced to its bare essentials, and dialogue is overlaid on top of establishing shots that were previously silent, or in this case, featuring voiceover narration, to achieve a much brisker, more narrative-focused effect. The US distributor didn't simply take an existing print of Phenomena and hack it up. They clearly had access to the separate dialogue, music and effects stems, allowing them to refashion scenes in this manner throughout the film. So scenes which previously had no music now carry over score from preceding scenes. And the same is also true in reverse.
Most of our patients are kept under restraint. Take my word for it, Inspector. The person you're looking for is not one of ours.
In this latter example, the loss of Motorhead's song Locomotive roaring away in the background results from the shifting of Inspector Geiger's visit to the asylum from its original location immediately following John McGregor's death to later in the film after Frau Bruckner has collected Jennifer from the bank. This, incidentally, is the only example of an entire scene being lifted wholesale and moved to a different location, though the moving around of individual shots within scenes can and does happen with some degree of frequency. Like the 2 additional insert shots that were found in the 110-minute cut and appear again here, these are largely used to hide cuts to the sort of lengthy single takes Argento is fond of using.
Really, Sophie, I have to go. I have to join my regiment at dawn. And you know it's nearly a 3-hour trip.
Oh, come on, stay a while longer.
I can't. I really have to go. Really, Sophie, I have to go.
Oh, come on, stay a while longer.
I can't. I really have to go.
In my discussion of the 110-minute version, I highlighted the fact that the longest sustained cut ran for 28 seconds. Here, however, a more meaningful endeavour would be to highlight the longest stretch of the film that is allowed to pass without a single edit occurring. The answer, at a paltry 2 minutes and 28 seconds, is the scene in which Inga is shut out of the house and McGregor is murdered. In second place, at 2 minutes and 15 seconds, is Jennifer coming round after being knocked out by Frau Bruckner and trying to retrieve the phone. It's fair to say that the largest amount of footage lost is to be found in the first half of the film. In the original Italian version, we reach what is the film's midpoint in terms of both narrative structure and overall running time, Jennifer summoning the flies and then passing out at the 58-minute mark, and only slightly sooner at 56 minutes in the international cut. In Creepers, we get there after a mere 35 minutes and 43 seconds. And one can certainly see the logic behind such an approach. The first half of Phenomena is by far its slowest. Once Jennifer escapes from the school and makes the decision to work with Donald Pleasence to catch the killer, the film develops a sense of urgency and purpose that it previously lacked. There are still plenty of cuts beyond this point, but they tend towards being much shorter, and indeed from the point at which Frau Bruckner knocks Jennifer out after catching her trying to use the phone, Creepers cleaves pretty closely to the international cut, barring the trimming of some non-essential material and the curtailing of some of the more violent shots, presumably to secure an R rating. There are certainly no further examples of scenes being removed in their entirety, like the EEG scene at the 34-minute mark, the deletion of which introduces a glaring plot hole when Jennifer tells Sophie,
"Your little brother isn't the only male to have graced this place. First you forgot the doctor."
But when all said and done, these deep, brutal cuts to the first half of the film leave their mark. The effect is disorienting as Bill Wyman's haunting Valley score jumps and skips in the opening scenes, and characters change locations between shots, hampering any semblance of continuity. Worse, however, for all that Phenomena has been accused of being ill-disciplined and possessing an arbitrary kitchen sink approach to its storytelling, the heavy-handed cutting of creepers in actual fact reveals just how deliberately constructed the film actually is, taking its time to get going and carefully setting up all the various pieces in play before knocking them down in that final demented climax. If you've already seen one or both of the longer versions, Creepers feels like a strange greatest hits version of the film with little sense of pacing, consistency or tone. Small wonder that Maitland McDonagh was absolutely scathing of the film when she wrote about it in her seminal book Broken Mirrors, Broken Minds, the first serious study of Argento's films. With so many of the individual components removed, it collapses like a house of cards. That's not to say it's unwatchable. Enough of the film remains intact to appreciate the artistry of Argento and his collaborators, and in particular the repartee between Pleasence and Connelly is as delightful as it is in the original version of the film. But this is definitely not the way to experience the film on a first viewing. As a curiosity piece, it's certainly interesting, but Phenomena has a deliberate, measured pace, and this ham-fisted attempt to speed it up, to turn it into something that it's not, might at best be described as having been misguided. Presenting Phenomena in its longest form for English-speaking viewers has always been a tricky endeavour, and one that has been tackled on several occasions in the past, with mixed results. For this 2017 release from Arrow Video, the task ahead of me was both clear and thoroughly daunting: to create the most consistent, seamless English language version of the 116-minute version of Phenomena that has ever been achieved. The greatest problem is the simple, unavoidable fact that, for a number of lines of dialogue, no English audio exists. As a result, there's no option but to revert to Italian for these lines, invariably hampering the verisimilitude of the scenes in question, though it is a problem that those who prefer to watch the longest version of Deep Red in English will be well used to, and thankfully affects far less of Phenomena's running time than that earlier film. There are, however, a number of further complications that arise, owing both to the differences between the Italian and English audio mixes and to the minuscule nature of so many of the differences. A cursory comparison between the two mixes will immediately reveal that the English mix sounds much fuller, with more prominent Foley, and, most likely owing to the amount of actual production sound used in the final mix, more of a feeling of authenticity to it. The Italian mix, in contrast, is cleaner, with greater clarity and less in the way of hissing, humming and other assorted background noise, but has a somewhat artificial quality to it that extends beyond the mere fact that the dialogue is dubbed. Compare the different versions of this scene from the film's climax.
Voglio aiutare! Sono grande! Sono grande!
Don't be afraid! I'm Inspector Geiger! I want to help you!
These discrepancies present obvious problems when it comes to switching between the two tracks for the purposes of assembling a complete soundtrack. If you simply revert to Italian where no English audio exists, the joins are blatant, with the background ambience abruptly fading to the point of being inaudible, and what remains taking on a much crisper timbre. In lengthier, dialogue-free sequences, such as Jennifer approaching and exploring the Alpine house, this is less of an issue, as it's possible to simply revert to the Italian audio for the dialogue-free stretches and only return to English once it becomes necessary, finding an appropriate join such as a door slamming or, in this example, the camera cutting between interior and exterior shots of the travelling bus. In other instances, however, for example where the missing footage amounts to only a few frames between shot changes, this simply isn't possible. It really is death by 1,000 cuts. And so, in these instances, bridging the gaps had to be achieved by repurposing material that's already present in the English mix. In other words, capturing and carefully looping short sections of background audio from elsewhere in the same scene.
These little creatures have enormous power. I could give you a multitude of examples. These little creatures have enormous power. I could give you a multitude of examples.
All well and good, but what happens in scenes like the conversation between Jennifer and Sophie during Jennifer's first night at the school, where, rather than simply random ambient noise that can be looped at will, music is playing behind the dialogue?
Can we change the subject? I need my sleep. I'm really tired from the trip.
You're right. Sometimes I lie awake all night thinking about it. What do you think about before you fall asleep?
My father.
If I thought about your father, I'd never get any sleep. You mind if I watch TV? I've got earphones.
No problem. Good night, Sophie.
The answer is that there's no perfect solution. The presence of music, and in this case a composition by Claudio Simonetti with a clear, distinctive melody, means that using background audio to bridge the gaps isn't feasible. The Japanese DVD from 2004 largely bypasses this problem by reverting fully to the Italian audio for the duration of scenes such as this one, and this was an approach I genuinely considered at one point, before concluding that this would leave viewers feeling thoroughly shortchanged. The overriding philosophy of the new hybrid mix is therefore that, if a line exists in English, it will be heard in English. Other releases, including the so-called integral German DVD by Dragon Entertainment and the previous Blu-ray release by Arrow, have adopted this same approach, though in each case the results were less than ideal. One major advantage I had at my disposal was that, for this newly restored presentation of the film, Arrow transferred the original 4-channel stereo elements of both the Italian and English mixes, which gave me considerable leeway when it came to isolating the dialogue, mainly confined to the centre channel, from the music, more evenly spread across the front, left and right and rear channels. From there, it was possible to layer in the same piece of music, captured from the film's original score, creating an almost seamless version of a scene that had only previously existed in an imperfect state.
Can we change the subject? I need my sleep. I'm really tired from the trip.
You're right. Sometimes I lie awake all night thinking about it. What do you think about before you fall asleep?
My father.
If I thought about your father, I'd never get any sleep. You mind if I watch TV? I've got earphones.
No problem. Good night, Sophie.
Other scenes, such as the one where McGregor introduces Jennifer to the Great Sarcophagi, which uses Simon Boswell's far more atonal piece, The Maggots, presented less of a challenge, though still required a degree of effort to get sounding just right.
Its sensory perception is extraordinary, quite unique.
But why did the glove have so many larvae in it?
Perhaps because when the murderer hides his victims, he likes to keep in physical contact with them, conserving them. He is a psychopath. If we mean to get him, we have to call on the services of the 2 greatest detectives ever known. Perhaps I should say unknown. Up until now.
Who were they?
You and him.
One final, vitally important principle that I applied to the creation of this hybrid track was that whenever reverting to Italian for a brief moment within a scene, the overall integrity of the scene had to be maintained as much as possible. In other words, the underlying texture couldn't noticeably change. This necessitated both the deliberate degradation of the Italian audio to more closely match the reduced clarity of its English counterpart, and the layering in of both background effects and randomised ambient noise sampled from the English mix. Take, for example, this scene in which a single line of dialogue had to be presented in Italian. Here it is before the layering process.
Probabilmente per causa mia.
I guess they sense the mood I'm in.
And here it is again with the layering now applied.
I've never done this before.
Probabilmente per causa mia.
I guess they sense the mood I'm in.
I'm often in a bad mood. Upset about something.
The end result is a new hybrid version of Phenomena that has an internal consistency not previously achieved. While watching a film shot in English with brief segments in dubbed Italian will never make for a perfect viewing experience, it's now possible for viewers to experience an English language version of the longest cut of the film with as few compromises as humanly possible. The editing of Phenomena has a convoluted and complicated history, and it's difficult to avoid the feeling that life would have been much simpler if it simply existed in a single optimal form. Thankfully, with this 3-disc release from Arrow, which includes all 3 cuts of the film and a range of audio options, viewers can now enjoy the film in whichever form is their personal favourite. And if you can't choose between the 3 cuts, well, now you no longer have to.